So your question is whether how can we know that our experience in meditation is illusion or whether it's the true nature, right? That is usually the task of the teacher in the beginning, where the teacher has already sufficient experience and knowledge of what could be the different experiences than the one which is true. Because it's very common that what yogis, what the meditators experience in meditation seems to be true, but in fact it's not. And there are tests to test it. So the main aim of meditation in Theravada Buddhism is to free ourselves from all greed, hatred, and ignorance. So if somebody experiences in their meditation freedom from greed, hatred, and ignorance, then it should be possible to test it outside the meditation practice. So if then the person has greed, hatred, ignorance outside of their meditation practice, then it's obvious that what they saw was not right. So your meditation should exceed over the time of your sitting or walking. If you just have an experience in your meditation, then that is not exactly what is appreciated in the Theravada Buddhism. In Theravada Buddhism, you train to have a skill, not to have an experience. An experience is impermanent and therefore ultimately useless. What we want is something that is permanent, something that is useful. And for that, your experience in your meditation must exceed the meditation time. So the Buddha explains that there are 6 kinds of special skills that you can get in meditation. We can separate them, we can summarize them in 2. So the worldly psychic powers, the psychic powers which are related to the world, and then one psychic power which is beyond, which exceeds the world, which goes beyond the world. So the worldly psychic powers such as levitating in the air, disappearing here, appearing somewhere else, knowing another's mind, walking over the water are pretty easy to check. Right? They're pretty easy to check. You know, like anybody around can say whether you are flying or not. It's not that easy. It's not that difficult to say whether somebody is flying in the air or not. You know, especially if it's 2 meters above the air, over a plain ground, or if somebody disappears and appears somewhere else. You know, that also can be checked quite easily. You can, like, if somebody's walking over the water, you know, that also can be checked. With today technology, sometimes it's not that easy. You know, some people are faking it, but on an unexpected surface, that should be working well. You know. Also, there is this psychic power of multiplication, so it's possible to make yourself into like 1,000. May I know what's your name? Miguel. So imagine that there would be 1,000 Miguels. Miguel here, Miguel there, and they would be all absolutely same as you. You know? So that also can be checked. You know? So these are psychic powers, these are skills which can be checked pretty easily. But in Buddhism they are not very much appreciated because they do not exceed the world. They are all bound to this world. So in Theravada Buddhism we believe that there is another life, that there is rebirth, and those who attain these psychic powers have the opportunity to be born in a special heavenly world after death. That heavenly world doesn't include any girls or pleasant food, no, nothing like that. In that heavenly world, they enjoy the pleasure of their meditation only. It's a special kind of heavenly world for people who have attained deep stages of concentration. It's called the Brahma world. There, the Brahmas actually do not have anything that they would eat. They do not have any sexual organs because they don't need them. They do not need anything like sex. They just enjoy the pleasures of their meditative powers, of their meditative skill. So that's the next life. But the problem is that although the people who would attain those psychic powers in this life and then get into that Brahma world, after many, many, many years, they can even fall into the hell. Because it's impermanent. Every life, every existence is impermanent, according to the Buddha's teachings. So, if everything is impermanent, then ultimately it is useless, because you try for that, you get it, and then you lose it. So you actually didn't get it in the ultimate sense. For the Buddha, what matters is something that is eternal, that is not impermanent. Something which is permanent. And only when it is permanent, then it can be pleasurable, and only when it is pleasurable, then it can be reliable. So when the Buddha teaches meditation, he always gives the highest appreciation for this permanent attainment, and that is Nibbana, enlightenment. Nibbana, usually known as Nirvana, but that's not the word we use in Theravada Buddhism. So Nibbana means the ultimate extinguishment of all craving. And if all craving is extinguished, then the condition for next life is extinguished. Because next life is dependent on the three things. You need to have some actions which you committed in the past, which will determine what kind of the life will be in the future. Then you need to have consciousness, so the consciousness can arise and pass and arise and pass, and this way it can flow into a new life. And there also must be craving, because if there is no craving, then there is not enough condition for the next life to arise. All life is dependent on craving. So when craving is entirely gone, when there is no more craving, then there is not enough condition for next life. And that's where the person attains the enlightenment. That means the freedom from these five aggregates. That means the body, feelings, perceptions, intentions, and consciousness. To know that you have attained enlightenment, there are certain checks. There are certain ways how to check that you have attained this psychic power. For the Buddha, only these six psychic powers matter. No other psychic power is useful. So, 6 psychic powers, 5 worldly psychic powers. So the first one is playing with the elements. So you want to levitate. Okay, so you may make your body into air and then you levitate. You want to walk over the water, so you make the water into earth, and then it becomes enough hard so you can walk over that. Or you want to dive in earth and emerge somewhere else. Okay, so you make the earth into the water element, and so you can dive. Or you want to walk through walls or through mountains, so you make them into air and you just walk through them. So this is the play with elements. The second psychic power is the divine eye. It's also known clairvoyance. And clairvoyance means that you can see whatever you want, past, future, far, near, the heavenly realm, the realm of hell or animals or human realm. Anything you want to see, you will see in the way it really is. The third one is the heavenly ear. It's also known as clairaudience. And there you can hear anything that happened in the past, will happen in the future, far, near, in the world of heavens, human world, in the netherworlds. The fourth psychic power is the ability to remember your past lives. Fifth psychic power is to know another person's thoughts, telepathy. So these are the 5 psychic powers that the Buddha appreciates out of the 6. And then there is the one which is which exceeds the world, which goes beyond the world, and that is the ultimate freedom from all greed, hatred, ignorance, the ultimate freedom from all craving, the ultimate freedom from all lust, ill will, laziness, worry, and doubt. So these are 6 psychic powers that the Buddha really appreciates, and I cannot think of any other psychic power that the Buddha would appreciate. So when we look at these aims, at these goals of meditation, then until you have attained one of these 6, we do not need to take it too much seriously. And when you have attained one of these 6, it's quite easy to check it. You know? So person who is fully enlightened doesn't have any fear. So even in the history of Myanmar, when a monk was believed to be fully enlightened, the people would then come and check the monk. So there is a story that a king wanted to check whether a monk is fully enlightened. So the king apparently prepared, one of his advisors or one of his workers into the bathroom of the monk secretly, and when the monk came into the bathroom, the worker had to grab the foot of the monk and see whether the monk will be scared or not. So if the monk is not scared, that maybe he is an arahant, but if he is scared, then it's sure he is not an arahant. Okay? Or more recently, there was this great monk, Webu Sayadaw, you know, and this Webu Sayadaw also was believed to be an arahant. He still is, but he's no more alive. And so people wanted to check what will Webu Sayadaw do if he is facing a problem. So in the hall for Dhamma discourse, for teaching Dhamma, they have prepared thorns on, on the path to see whether the Sayadaw, when he steps on the thorns, whether, what will he do? So, being an arahant is not always very comfortable. So this way, I don't remember the results of the stories, but it's pretty clear that if they were scared or if they were surprised, then they would not be considered to be arahants, and if they were not surprised, if they were perfectly fine, then it is still possible that they would be arahants. There was another test for Webu Sayadaw in India, where people took crunchy kind of biscuits or whatever, and they covered it by a piece of cloth so nobody can see that. And they prepared it they prepared it over the place where Webu Sayadaw would certainly walk. And they wanted to know whether, as the Webu Sayadaw is walking over these crunchy biscuits, what will happen? Who knows? Nobody knows what will happen, with somebody who has psychic powers. So they wanted to know, Okay. So they prepared the biscuits, they prepared the piece of cloth, and they were observing what Webu Sayadaw will do as he's walking over these crunchy biscuits. And to their surprise, as he was walking over this crunchy biscuits, there was absolutely no sound. The biscuits should be crunched and they should be crushed, But there was no sound of crushing, no sound of anything. It was absolutely silent, so they were really surprised what's happening. And then after Webu Sayadaw left, they uncovered those biscuits and they saw that they're untouched. So there are stories like that. So it is possible, you know, to check even the sixth psychic power. Until then, don't believe anything. You know, until then, don't believe anything, and your teacher will also not believe anything if he is an experienced teacher. Some teachers, they make conclusions. They will say, okay, yes, you are enlightened on this level, you are enlightened on that level, but that will be then severely criticized by other teachers. So it's not safe. It's not safe. It's very common that people would believe they are enlightened, and then after some time they will prove by their actions that they are not enlightened. You know, so if somebody has attained at least the first level of enlightenment out of the 4, they would, in the ideal case, never break any of the 5 precepts. So they would never ever destroy life. They would never ever take something what's not given. They would never commit adultery. They would never tell a lie. They would never drink alcohol. But we can see that many people who believe that they're enlightened, especially those from the West, because they don't have this this strong faith, you know, for the morality. So there it's really well tested. You know, because so they are not moral, they are not ethical because they would believe it, you know. They would be ethical because they're really enlightened. And it's very common that people from the West, when they're enlightened, they are ready to kill a mosquito or a bedbug. They are ready to drink alcohol. They're ready to enjoy sensual intercourse, you know, with somebody who, you know, who they do not care for, who is not, who they do not dedicate their life for, let's say. So then the strict masters who are really faithful to the scriptures, they will say, no, these people are not enlightened. And these scriptures, are they true or maybe they're wrong? So many people would like to believe that they are wrong. You know, if a book doesn't say that what you want the book to say, then the only option you have is to reject the book. But that doesn't mean that the book is wrong. These books which explain that an enlightened person will never ever kill any living being, even at the cost of their own life. That they will never ever drink any kind, even a drop of any kind of alcohol, even at the cost of their own life. These scriptures, these so-called commentaries, were written at the time when, according to the historical records, have been most arahants, most enlightened beings in the area where the scriptures were written. That means Sri Lanka. The main scripture was compiled in northern India in the basis of speaking, you know, in the oral tradition, as the oral tradition. The commentaries were compiled more in written way, based on the oral tradition, on the oral tradition's explanations, and that happened. So the main scripture would come maybe from original would come perhaps from 5th, 6th century before Christ, and the commentaries are coming latest from 3rd century after Christ. So that's around 900 years. But that doesn't matter, at least to me, because during that time, during that 3rd century after Christ, there were many, many, many monks who are believed to have the highest enlightenment. And the scriptures basically describe these monks' path and attainment. So if somebody doesn't like it, then that means they do not like the way how these monks were enlightened. But because the strictness is not appreciated, for me that doesn't matter, you know, because the stricter the better, you know, the stricter the higher the probability that it's right. So if the scriptures say, okay, so an arahant will never fall asleep, he will never lose his mindfulness, then this is special. This can be checked. you know. But if somebody comes and says, no, this is not the Buddha's word, certainly an arahant can fall asleep, then it's not easy to check a kind of enlightenment like that, because it's more sloppy, you know, because falling asleep is always easier than not falling asleep. So it's easier to fake an enlightenment which is similar to non-enlightenment than an enlightenment which is very, very different, which is very special. So that's how you would check, you know. So if somebody believes that they are on the first, second, third level, then it's difficult to check. Then they just need to continue until they gain the highest level of enlightenment. And if they believe that they're enlightened, that's nice, but I would never take them for a word. For those who are fully enlightened, just ask them, how long time do you take rest at night? How long time do you fall asleep at night? Because even the Buddha can take rest, but he will not fall asleep, you know? He will not slumber. So this loss of consciousness is something that a fully enlightened being doesn't experience, even if it had to be 50, 80 or 100 years in a row. That's quite special, isn't it? So that can be checked, you know. That's a special thing. So that can be checked, it can be measured, you know. It can be easily tested, so that you can be sure that really this person has attained something special, something that an ordinary human being cannot do, you know. And but this is not just like, okay, so I'm awake, you know, so somebody doesn't need to sleep, let's say 2-3 nights, so they will come to the conclusion that maybe they're enlightened. No, that would be wrong. If somebody cannot sleep or don't have to sleep for several nights, then that absolutely doesn't mean anything. This is just a test, you know, for the other things, for the basic things. So most important thing that there is the mindfulness. So what you create through enlightenment is continuous mindfulness. The fact that you don't fall asleep is just the obvious effect of not losing mindfulness. So you are 24 hours a day mindful, and that is immensely useful. How is that useful? Because whatever you do, you know what's happening. So you do not lose a single second of your life. So your life gains 100% value, because you do the best you really can. You know, because you can 24 hours a day. For an ordinary human being, even if they do not fall asleep at night for a few days, still, even during those few days, they will lose mindfulness. For example, when they are infatuated with a picture or with a human being, or when they are angry with somebody, or when they are enthusiastic about something and they just don't care about anything else. At that moment, they lose their mindfulness. Then you ask them, so what did you do the last 1 hour? They would say, I was sitting. What did you think about? They would say, I don't remember. So they lost their time, they lost their 1 hour. For an arahant, whatever he remembers, whatever he thinks about, whatever arises in his mind, even the littlest thought, he is perfectly aware of it. So if you ask him one hour after sitting for an hour or whatever, you ask them, so what did you think about last time? You know, what did you think about the last 1 hour? What did you do? Then he will know it all. He will just remember it, everything. Because he was there, you know. It's like when you are really enthusiastic about a story, then you will usually remember quite a lot from the story, because you were entirely there with the story. So in the enlightened person's case, they're entirely involved with the present moment. And for them, present moment means the present moment in their body and in their senses, in their mind. So they are not going outside, you know, into the into the concepts. So they will of course be clearly aware of concepts and they will be able to conceptualize, but they will always know what's happening in the ultimate sense. So they will know, okay, seeing, hearing, smelling, you know. They will know that everything that arises and passes is dependent on these six senses. That means seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, bodily sensation and thinking.